In my 30s, I met my husband Stephen, who was 2 years older than me at the time. We met at a party at a friend's house celebrating an event at Stephen's cousin's house. There was an immediate connection between us and soon we started dating. Sometime later, after being happily married for 5 years, we had a young son. The first meeting with my future mother-in-law took place at a rather difficult moment, at the funeral of her brother. Stephen asked me to accompany him for moral support. Just before I left, his cousin warned me about my mother-in-law. He described her as someone with unusually high standards and judgmental tendencies, but advised me not to take her behavior personally because she behaved that way with everyone. Stephen confirmed his brother's words, assuring me that he would support me no matter what. Stephen's cousin's warning proved to be restrained. At the funeral, my mother-in-law made a scene over my presence, considering me a stranger at a family event. However, my husband quickly intervened, reminding me that my aunt, the deceased widow, had not objected to my participation. Regardless, the rest of the ceremony was marked by disgruntled looks and passive-aggressive comments from the mother-in-law. The incident at the funeral was not the only example of her difficult character. The scene she caused at our wedding was another chapter in the history of our relationship, although it requires a separate story. Nevertheless, after a brief period of minimal communication with my mother-in-law, Stephen found the right moment to inform her of my pregnancy. I expected that the news of my pregnancy would cause my mother-in-law to react negatively and cause conflict. However, her reaction came as a complete surprise. To my surprise, she showed a completely different side of herself, expressing genuine delight at the thought of becoming a grandmother. Her congratulations and joyful attitude was an unexpected turnaround for us. This change in her demeanor led me, albeit with some hesitation, to allow her to visit us during the birth. She expressed a desire to be there for the birth of my son, but I adamantly declined the opportunity. Unfortunately, this led to her less attractive character traits showing themselves again when she made a scene, causing me to have to leave the birthing center. After the birth of my son, I refused home visits, an agreement that my husband also supported. However, my mother-in-law called, crying and apologizing, stating that her emotional outburst was due to the shock of realizing she had become a grandmother. Contrary to my initial skepticism, I decided to relent and allowed her to meet her grandson. When she first held him in her arms and told me he was beautiful, I thought our rapport began to improve. But when I left to go to the kitchen to make drinks, I heard my husband asking her to leave. When I returned, I found that she had started yelling about the need for a DNA test, claiming that the baby didn't look like anyone in the family. After being kicked out, she posted these accusations on social media, spreading rumors of my alleged infidelity and demanding a DNA test to prove my husband's paternity. My social media post, in which I offered to take a DNA test for my son's paternity only after my mother-in-law did a similar test for her son, garnered widespread attention. The move only exacerbated the situation. After my post, my mother-in-law contacted my husband demanding that he remove it, to which he chose not to engage in a discussion and simply hung up the phone. The discussion that broke out raised doubts about my husband's paternity, as her harsh reaction to the idea of a DNA test only added fuel to the fire of public interest. Even my husband began to question the issue, which made me question my decision to respond in this way. I realized that my comment may have seemed too harsh, and I now wonder if I overstepped my bounds by suggesting DNA testing as a condition. My words, although spoken in a state of emotional tension, may seem rash, especially when I blame myself for questioning my husband's paternity in this way. Your decision to respond to your mother-in-law's demands by offering to do a DNA test for your son only after she had fulfilled a similar demand for her child is admirable. You simply asked her to do the same thing she demanded of you, demonstrating fairness. Your stance shows that you are willing to defend your honor and not allow false accusations against you on social media. If your mother-in-law continues to spread misconceptions, she should be ready for your public response. It is important not to let the situation escalate to a witch hunt. You correctly noted that her behavior may raise concerns about her mental health, given her extreme emotional swings. Also, her demanding to be present at the birth and then taking to social media shows a lack of understanding of personal boundaries. The idea of gifting her DNA tests for various holidays as an ironic gesture emphasizes the absurdity of the situation. Hoping that your decision turned out to be the right one and mentioning how your husband questions his paternity emphasizes the complexity of the circumstances. Your mother-in-law is certainly exhibiting unconventional behavior, which may be the result of her personal problems or misunderstanding of the situation. You seem to have found a way to stop her without engaging in further conflict. Your decision to avoid further contact with her and continue to live your life, enjoying time with your newborn baby and loving husband, is a wise decision. It will allow you to avoid unnecessary drama and enjoy a peaceful life with your family. Now I want to tell a different story. When I was 28 years old, I took my first trip to New York City with my girlfriend. I had been there once before, but had not had the opportunity to engage in tourist activities. For my companion, it was her first visit to the city. She has considerable vanity and never appears in public without makeup. Due to baggage restrictions imposed by our airline, we decided to travel with minimal belongings. However, my girlfriend took up every available space in her suitcase by packing several pairs of high-heeled shoes, which left no room for sneakers. She even chose heels for going to the airport. I expressed my concern about her choice of shoes, pointing out that walking around town in them would be extremely uncomfortable. I suggested that she might have to buy sneakers later. My remark caused her irritation. She replied that she had the right to wear what she wanted and asked if I felt insecure about the fact that her heels made her taller than me. However, my insecurity on this issue was non-existent. During our time in New York, we actively explored the city despite my girlfriend's choice of footwear. We walked together through the Metropolitan Museum of Art Gallery, the Bronx Zoo, Central Park, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Her decision not to buy sneakers brought humor to our adventure, though I couldn't help but notice her discomfort. In the back of my mind, I felt that if I hadn't brought it up, she probably would have purchased them herself and not in spite of me. At the conclusion of the trip, she expressed the idea that I alone felt the fatigue, claiming that her own discomfort was due to my unwillingness to continue our walks. She particularly wanted to visit Central Park and accused me of distrusting her, calling me an idiot for my doubts. So, in her opinion, I turned out to be an idiot for my caution and assumptions. Turns out, my girlfriend easily disproved my doubts by demonstrating that she was capable of spending the entire trip without taking off her high heels. She strutted confidently through the streets of New York, leaving me far behind despite my flat-soled shoes. My remarks may have seemed like a reflection of my own insecurities, especially about her being taller than me in heels. It may have seemed like I was trying to control her by not trusting her ability to make her own decisions. She knows exactly what is comfortable and what feels good for her. You probably shouldn't have told her how to feel or what to wear. Your attempts to criticize her may have been perceived as an attempt to equalize you, causing you to accuse her of vanity and lack of intelligence, when in fact she has the ability to make her own decisions, likes to groom herself and wear makeup. It's interesting to ponder why you are together at all, given that you probably don't value her for who she is. If you don't change your controlling and insecure behavior, chances are she will realize her own value and decide to end this relationship. She strives to look her best and you don't always seem to support her in doing so. Ironically, if she were to change her approach to grooming, you would probably express your displeasure by calling her sloppy. I have a friend of Italian descent who will never go outside in flat-soled shoes. Whether she's headed to a meeting for coffee or somewhere else, high heels are an essential part of the look for her, and she undoubtedly surpasses many in her pursuit of beauty and style. That says a lot, including the fact that your relationship with your girlfriend is facing serious problems. My next story. My friend Jess and I have known each other since 9th grade. We're both in our early 30s now. Years ago, when I was getting married, Jess was a bridesmaid in my wedding. It was expected that I would assume a similar role when it was her turn to get married. Jess got engaged a few years ago, and she always had a specific date by which she was aiming to organize her wedding. However, her plans were repeatedly postponed. Finally, the wedding was scheduled for December. By this time, Jess was expecting a baby, but the birth of the baby was anticipated more than 8 months after the wedding, so pregnancy shouldn't have been a problem. However, last December, my family and I were involved in a car accident. As a result, I lost my little sister and my pregnancy. Despite the deep personal tragedy, I still plan to attend Jess's wedding and give her my full support. Wedding celebrations were no longer central to my thoughts. However, I was determined to help as much as I could. I had previously been given permission to skip all the pre-event and planning stages. However, as the wedding date approached, Jess's patience with my situation began to wane. After the accident, an unforeseen situation arose that I offered to take on and pay for. At the scene of the accident, even though I continued to be financially obligated, I asked that someone else take care of the arrangements as I felt unable to take full responsibility. However, Jess insisted that I do it myself. Standing my ground, I faced accusations that I was allegedly acting selfishly and not showing concern for her. She elaborated on everything she had done for me, expressing frustration with my behavior. In trying to get my point across to her, I was met with a lack of understanding. In the end, Jess made a condition. If I didn't help with the wedding, my presence at the reception would be unwelcome. We decided to leave the situation unchanged. Deep down, I felt that Jess still wanted me at her wedding, but she was no longer expressing that desire directly. I had originally planned to apologize and leave the event in spite of everything. However, giving in to a last-minute desire to respect her decision, I did not show up at the wedding, which took place 3 weeks ago. My absence was widely discussed on social media. Throughout the night, I followed my friends' posts and messages. The next morning, when I tried to view Jess's page, I found that it had disappeared. Jess had blocked me, as well as several of our mutual friends. It turned out that Jess was deeply saddened by my absence from the wedding. After the celebration, she actively expressed her disappointment on social media, which led to many people blocking me. Some of them started expressing negativity towards me for not attending the wedding. First, let me express my sincere condolences for your loss. Grief and grieving take time to heal, and it is absolutely normal that you felt the need to pull away from the preparations for your friend's wedding, especially if it would have affected your emotional state. It may have been worth talking to her about it beforehand to avoid misunderstandings. As for the expectation of gratuitous help with wedding preparation, this does raise questions. It's unclear why some people assume they deserve free labor in organizing such an event. You even paid for the venue, which goes beyond normal help. Preparing a wedding is the responsibility of those who organize it. If Jess really saw your absence from the wedding as some sort of test of friendship, that would be extremely unfair of her. True friendship requires understanding and empathy, especially during difficult times in life. You did the best you could given the circumstances, including paying for the venue, and made it clear that you couldn't make any additional commitments. I'm truly sorry that you had to face this attitude in addition to your grief. Remember that looking out for your own well-being is more important than anything else, especially in times of grief. A story that really surprised me. I recently witnessed a surprising revelation. My sister, who is 21 years old, is expecting a baby. This revelation was followed by her desire to exchange rooms with us. She explained that my room seemed more suitable for her for a number of reasons. In particular, my room is on the first floor as opposed to hers, which is on the first floor. This makes it much easier to move around, especially since she will have to go up and down frequently with her future baby. An additional advantage of my room is its proximity to the kitchen, which is certainly convenient, as well as having additional storage space, which is important for a mom-to-be. She noted that my room has everything I need for convenience and practicality, including ample storage space. Interestingly, despite her room being larger in size, my sister sees the benefits in the smaller space of my room. This comes as a surprise considering she has more stuff to put in there. In addition, although she does not have her own bathroom in her room, there is a bathroom next door, so access to it is not a problem. This fact emphasizes that for her, having privacy is not as critical as convenience and functionality. My room has just been freshened up with a new coat of paint and replacement of flooring, which makes the move less appealing to me. I shared these worries with my sister, expressing doubts about the worthiness of the effort if the rooms were going to be exchanged anyway. In response to my arguments, my sister accused me of selfishness, emphasizing that my unwillingness to give up her room was a display of hypocrisy. She recalled the time when I myself had expressed my desire to exchange rooms, which I had then refused. Now that she herself was in that situation, my resistance seemed unfair in her eyes. My sister also tried to convey to me the complexity of her situation, emphasizing how difficult it would be for her in her current circumstances. She tried to make me feel guilty for refusing, but I remained steadfast in my decision not to swap rooms despite all her entreaties. I explained that the financial side of things also played a role. My parents covered the cost of renovating my room, while the rent and other expenses remain on her shoulders. In addition to this, my sister is in a difficult personal situation. She is no longer in a relationship with the father of her unborn child, who still lives with his family. This context adds further complexity to our dialogue about a possible room swap. Let's start with the basics. You both live in your parents' house. They are the ones who have invested in updating the house, including new flooring, making your rooms essentially their property as well as yours. This perspective allows you to see that any decisions about rooms affect the interests of the entire family. Your sister argues that caring for a newborn on the first floor will be easier, especially given the presence of a bathroom. This will undoubtedly affect the whole family, so it is appropriate to discuss the matter altogether. Her arguments sound convincing, especially when you consider the possibility of a difficult labor or the need for a C-section, which would make climbing stairs a real challenge. Moreover, the regular trips to the kitchen required for bottle feeding would be particularly burdensome if stairs had to be climbed each time. Such prospects raise concerns about safety, especially at night. It is important for the family to be supportive in such circumstances, hoping for understanding and mutual support in the future. However, the suggestion that the best solution is for the sister to move into her own accommodation may seem controversial. After all, being mature enough to have a child does not always equate to being able to provide your own place to live. Family planning is a complex issue that should not be seen as one person's individual responsibility. The idea of moving in with the child's father may also not be the best solution depending on the circumstances. All of these points emphasize the importance of dialogue and finding solutions together within the family. Next story. In November, my husband and I joyfully welcomed the birth of our son into the world. After much deliberation, we chose the name Reed for him. Although neither of us had an initial preference, it was a name we felt comfortable with. We felt strongly that it was perfect for our child. I was aware that choosing a name for my son would be perceived as something unusual in my family. Traditionally, they tend to favor the reuse of names that are popular and rank high on the male name charts. In our lineage, the names James, Benjamin, and William are particularly prized. Despite this, Reed is not an exotic or unseen name. However, when we announced the name we had chosen, my family's reaction was subdued. Comments about how some people choose strange names for their children followed almost immediately. Although my husband and I were not explicitly mentioned, we both felt that these comments were directed at us. Then, there were repeated statements about the merits of traditional, classic names that are widely recognized, loved, and often used. Subsequently, conversations about the name Reed became more pointed. Relatives commented that it was an odd choice and wondered where we got it from, despite the name being in the top 400 popular names. My parents accused me of trying to follow fashion without thinking about my child's future. I decided to meet my folks alone, without my husband, because I felt it was unfair to drag him into a family dispute. I asked them what exactly was bothering them and why they were so harsh about the name they had chosen. In response, they admitted that they disliked the name Reed intensely, finding it unattractive and ill-advised. I was told that we should have reconsidered our choice and chosen a real name rather than succumb to the fashion trends of the last 2 or 3 decades. In their opinion, we had many wonderful names to choose from, and we made a terrible decision. Afterward, my in-laws expressed that they were trying to tactfully open my eyes, but their attempts were ignored by me. I replied to them that if their remarks about my son's name were intended to cause me to regret the choice I had made, then they had not accomplished their goal. Instead, it only reinforced my disappointment in them for their rude and insulting remarks. My family did not meet my words with understanding and accused me of being rude, saying I was acting like an immature child unable to accept the truth. Your family seems to emphasize conformity to conventional norms, which some may find boring and lacking in creativity. You managed to choose a name for your son that resonated with both of you, which is truly commendable. When we named our baby boy, we too consciously avoided repeating existing names in the family. We were guided by the thought that each name carries its own unique set of associations, both positive and negative, and could lead to unwanted comparisons. Your desire to protect your husband from the family's daily admonishments is also worthy of respect. After all, family arguments about repeating names can quickly become tiresome. There is a belief in my culture that says that giving a child the name of a living relative can lead to the child's untimely demise. If it were that easy to get a family excited, I would probably start spreading this superstition every chance I got, for ease of communication. Interestingly, in our family circle, We also avoid naming our children after ancestors. It's hard to imagine what it's like to be so strongly attached to traditional names that even the name you choose for your child is so aversive. As for Reed, it's not a strange name at all. I've met several people with that name in my 30 years. It's unbelievable that your family reacted so strongly, and I would be concerned about what comments they might leave for your son in the future.